Hello, welcome everybody to the Jimmy Duster Music Channel, back with the Incorrigible Luddite for our top 5 albums of 1982, albums celebrating a 40th birthday this year. Listened to a lot of these, and I know for me, like we were talking beforehand, these wouldn't have been my top 5 years ago. A lot of these were sort of, COVID lockdown discoveries for me. And, I actually, my number 1, I don't even have a physical copy of. So.
Oh, that's sacrilege.
It might be sacrilege. Yep.
No.
But, we're gonna make sure you like and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for joining in.
Please do, folks.
Make sure you comment on our video, and let us know what your top 5 albums are.
We want to know what you, the people, think. We want to know your top 5 albums of 1982, and we want to see how different they are from ours. I know ours are going to be very different. And keep in mind, of course, this, as always, is all subjective.
Yep. Well, I'll tell you right now, mine is a little more leaning more towards the hard rock side of things. And I'm guessing yours is probably going to lean a little bit more towards the art rock, avant-garde art rock side. So I do have some progressive leanings in mine, but and some pop too. But I think you're going to be surprised. So, Mr. Luddite, why don't you kick us off with your top 5 there? Or your number 5.
Well, let me say I'm going to preface by saying, and of course, as we mentioned, this is all subjective. Okay. 1982 is my favorite year in the history of popular music, and a lot of it has to do with my top 2 records, which are 2 of my 10 favorite records of all time. One of them has always been one of my 10 favorite records of all time. The other one, my number 1, I discovered in 2016, and it was instantly my favorite record of all time upon discovery of it. But we're going to number 5 first. My number 5, and it was really hard picking really 4th and 5 because there were some candidates who were honorable mentions that are also masterpieces. But my number 5, I am going with Duran Rio.
Good choice.
Had to put her at number 5. Yes, Duran is more of a singles band. This is their only masterpiece, okay? But the singles on this record are so strong. Hungry Like a Wolf is a great single. I've always loved Save a Prayer, always loved it, but more than any of them, Rio, which is one of the songs of the year. I'm a sucker for that kind of sax. And, John Taylor is a really underrated bass player.
Yeah.
If you guys... anyone who just equates, Duran as like being a boy band kind of thing, they're missing the picture. John Taylor is one of the best bass players I've ever heard. Phenomenal. And Simon Le Bon's got an excellent voice. I just think it's a great record. I love the cover. I love all 3 singles. Some of the deep cuts are pretty good. It's a no-brainer for me. Well, it was tough between this and 3 other ones just on the outside, or honorable mentions, but this is the only Duran album that would ever make top 5 for years. So my number 5, I'm going with Rio.
Good choice. So that's on my honorable mentions, and 40 years ago, it probably would have been number 1 on my list.
Great record.
So great choice.
You know how many times I watched the video for Rio when I was a kid? It's just you can't even fathom it.
Well, I'm going to pull a little host privilege here, and I've got a tie for number 5.
Okay.
I started, and I'm like, there's one album I can't leave off this list, and the other 5, and I'm like, I can't leave this other one off. So it was trying to jam 6 albums into 5 spots, and there's probably a lot more I could have done this with. But like I said earlier, a lot of these albums have become more of my favorites over the last few years. So, but my first number 5. Alan Parsons Project, Eye in the Sky, if you can see it there. This was a great album. This is another one that I absolutely loved in 1982. And as big a hockey fan as I am, you know, hearing players introduced to the song "Serious," the opener on the album,
That's a great track.
I couldn't leave it off the album. The other one, number 5, is a band I've known about for a long time and recently discovered their older stuff. And that's Whitesnake. Their older stuff was not available. It was only available as in Europe and England initially. And over the last 5 years or so, I've started to discover some of their older stuff, namely their first 5 or 6 albums, I think it is. But I picked up this box set, little box of snakes, that has, I think, 6 or 8 CDs in it, including some live stuff. It was like $20 for that box set. So
Okay.
I couldn't resist that. But their 1982 release, Saints and Sinners, with Bernie Marsden on guitar. I always liked John Sykes after he joined the band, but the more I've started listening to Bernie Marsden, this one has become maybe my favorite, along with the first U.S. release. I keep wanting to say slip of the tongue, but I believe that was their first U.S. release. But this one has become my favorite album of theirs. A very early version of Here I Go Again.
Interesting. Okay.
A little different. It's just a great album, top to bottom. So if you haven't heard this, check this out.
So they must have really liked Here I Go Again. They re-recorded it in 1987. That's interesting.
Yep, and there's another one on here too. I forget which one it was. Oh, Crying in the Rain. And early Crying in the Rain on this too.
I think that was on that big record too, in '87.
Bernie Marsden had a big hand in writing those songs. And then once they, you know, became big over here, they re-released them and reworked them a little bit. A little slower version of Here I Go Again on this album. It's a couple clicks slower, a little more groovy, I guess, is an easier way to describe it. But I'm a big fan of Bernie Marsden's guitar playing, and Mel Galley as well, who's a terrific guitar player. Not, from what I understand, Coverdale's not the easiest gentleman to work with.
Not a big fan, but you know, I remember they were really big, and in the Still of the Night, that one was okay. I kind of like that one. Was it In the Still of the Night? Was that what it was called?
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like that one. He's not easy to work with, you said?
Yeah, I've heard that.
Huh. I saw him on the show with Steve Jones from the Sex Pistols. It's called Jonesy's Jukebox. That he hosts a show in L.A. and he looked really made up and stuff. Like this was like 2012 or something. I'm talking about like, you know, Steve Jones looked like a biker or something, and Coverdale looked like, you know, he'd been hanging out at a golf course or something. You know, so what do I know?
Back to you for your number 4.
Number 4, again, this was one, the top 2 were really easy, then it was difficult. This is another masterpiece. It's going to be the first of what I consider as 4 masterpieces, probably my least favorite of the 4, but it's still my 4th favorite record of 1982, and that is going to be Prince, 1999. You all know the cover on this. Do you ever see Breakfast Club? You know the cover on this. Okay. I'm actually a lot like Allison. So, you know, consider me, that would be the character that I'm probably most like. So, of course, I have this record. The thing about 1999 that's interesting is I'm not really that keen on, it's the opposite of the Duran record. I'm not that keen on the singles on this record. I don't dislike them, but I'm not a fan of Delirious at all. Really, and Little Red Corvette in 1999 are you know, for Prince, they're good, but for me, you know, they're kind of mediocre. This album, 1999, is all about the deep tracks. Okay, there are 4 or 5 just incredible deep tracks on this record. One of them used to get a lot of play at clubs and parties. I love that one, but my favorite song on the record, and one of my favorite Prince songs of all time, is Automatic, which is just a electro funk kind of a workout, some Kraftwerk influence on it, some funkadelic influence on it. Very original what he did on this track. Automatic, one of my 5 favorite Prince tracks of all time. All, I think about 9 minutes of it. Love his vocals on it. Speaking of great vocals, his vocal performance on International Lover is just splendid. What a song vocally. Maybe his second greatest vocal performance after the Beautiful Ones on Purple Rain. But yeah, big fan of International Lover. Lady Cab Driver, he brings out the funk on that one. Kind of steers away from the R&B and gets funky. So he's showing off his diversity on this record already. And of course, we've also got the legendary DMSR, one of the greatest party songs of all time. I love it. If you're asking for a song to play at a party that's funky and kind of salacious and all that good stuff, DMSR might be my go-to. But I love this record. It's a 10 out of 10. The first of his 4 masterpieces, 1999. It's my number 4.
Yep. Another great choice. It's on my honorable mentions. And another one of those records that 40 years ago easily could have been number 1 for me. In 1982, was in heavy rotation at my house, knew it by heart, and was my introduction to Prince. And over time has become really about my 4th or 5th favorite Prince album.
It's my 4th favorite. The 3 that I have in front of it are so strong. I mean, 2 of them are probably amongst my 20 favorite records of all time. Then there's the Underdog record, which is definitely Around the World in a Day, which I love.
Yeah.
Kind of the neo-psych soul fusion of that one I really dig. But 1999 is definitely a masterpiece. It's a 10 out of 10.
Yep, I agree. All right, back to me for number 4. This is a discovery for me, and I discovered this sort of backhanded. This wasn't. I listened to a lot of this band when I was younger, and they when they were putting out some good heavy hard rock, they went disco and pop for a while. Kind of got away from their traditional sound, returned to it for this album. And I discovered this album. I never heard this album when I was younger, but one of my favorite guitar players is Robben Ford. And I was reading about Robben. They said he played on a Kiss album.
Oh.
Now, Robben is a jazz blues guitar player, one of the founders of the Yellow Jackets, along with Jimmy Haslip, who also plays on this album, Creatures of the Night, incidentally. So I decided to give this album a listen, and this was a return to the hard rock of the early 70s or mid 70s, and got away from that disco sound that they had kind of turned to, and the poppier dance sound that they had turned to, and the last album before the masks came off, slightly after this. Ace Frehley's listed on the album, but doesn't play on it. Vinnie Vincent plays all the guitar.
Pre-Vinnie Vincent invasion.
Yeah, pre-Vinnie Vincent invasion. But Vinnie plays on this album, plays all the guitar parts except for those that Robben plays, and Steve Ferris. And there's some other guests. Steve Ferris from Mr. Mister made an appearance on this album.
Mr. Mister.
Robben Ford, Jimmy Haslip from the Yellow Jackets made an appearance on this album. And the Robben Ford songs, I Still Love You and Rock and Roll Hell, my 2 favorites on this album. Great album, good return to the hard rock sound by Kiss. Pick it up and listen to it if you haven't heard it.
Interesting. Someone said at a record store once that that's the heaviest Kiss record. Is that right? Like the heaviest record in their whole catalog.
I would agree.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a heavy record. It's a good record.
Okay. All right.
Number 3.
Well, as I return to the screen, my number 3 is by an artist who's had an enormous resurgence, and I think who I'm going to mention here, and that is because of one song. My advice is for people to listen to this album and stop listening to the same song over and over and over and over and over again. And that artist is Kate Bush. And my number 3 is going to be The Dreaming. From 1982. This has always been my favorite Kate Bush record. This is an example of an artist being an artist. Okay. I believe she produced this on her own. I'm pretty sure this is kind of a Prince moment for her in a lot of ways. And I think Prince and Kate Bush have a lot of similarities, kind of, prodigies, right? You know, reclusive, and there's just a lot of massively talented at a very young age. Natural born musicians. There's a lot of similarities. So it's having this at number 3, just in front of 1999, it actually makes total sense. But The Dreaming is a great record. She goes into like very different vocal characters on the record. I think she was very inspired by Peter Gabriel on this record, particularly on maybe off Supper's Ready off the Genesis album Foxtrot. There were some great songs on this record. A lot of polyrhythmic playing on the record. A lot of shifting time signatures. This record, without any question, could be deemed a progressive rock record. You don't have to have heavy guitars and lots of guitars, changes and to be considered progressive rock. This has all the time changes anyone could ever want, shifting time signatures, polyrhythms. But at the same time as being a progressive rock record, it's also kind of an art pop record. Okay, very experimental. There Goes the Tenor is my favorite track on the record. I love kind of the atmospheric breakdown that goes through the song 3 or 4 times. Obviously, her vocals are very theatrical across the board and fantastic. I also love Suspended in Gaffa. It's probably my second favorite song on the record. And last, I'm going to go with Night of, I believe it's Night of the Swallow, which is a gorgeous track. I hope I got that one right. I don't have my cheat sheet with me. But that's kind of a precursor to what you're going to get on Hounds of Love, that particular track. Some other interesting tracks from the record are Get Out of My House, which was inspired by Stephen King's The Shining, and also Houdini, which is about Harry Houdini. So I love this record. I love the experimentalism on it, and I just love the fact that she did whatever she wanted to do and just made this weird, eccentric piece of art. My number 3, I'm going to give it a 10.5 out of 10, and that is Kate Bush, The Dreaming from 1982. 10.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I listened to that album over the last couple of weeks for the first time, and definitely one I need to listen to again. So I thought that was a really good album.
Yeah, I think it's a very challenging listen, and there's a lot going on there. I think in some ways you could equate it to Boomerang, which you listened to about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Is the more you listen to The Dreaming, I think the more it's going to make sense. It's that kind of a record.
Yeah. All right, back to me for number 3. One of the first concerts I attended on my own, I was fortunate that with my dad's job, I was able to get into a lot of concerts at St. John's Arena. Saw Rush in the 70s there.
Wow, early.
Bob Seger, AC/DC, Cheap Trick. Saw a lot of Jackson Browne, a lot of good concerts back in the 70s at St. John's Arena. But one of the first I attended on my own was at Veterans Memorial here in Columbus, and I went to see Ted Nugent. And there was a band opening up for them named Alcatraz with
Steve Vai.
Yngwie Malmsteen.
Oh, Yngwie Malmsteen.
Okay. And a gentleman singing for them, Graham Bonnet, that just seemed to be out of place. But I love the way the guy sang. So since that day in 1983, I believe it was, maybe 84, I've always been a Graham Bonnet fan of his vocals. And I've recently discovered over the last 5 years, Michael Schenker Group. Assault Attack with Mr. Graham Bonnet on vocals by the Michael Schenker Group. Fantastic album. You've got the title track, Assault Attack, Rock You to the Ground, which is a great song, Danger, Samurai, Desert Song, both fantastic songs. Broken Promises, Searching for a Reason, Ulcer. This one has Girl from Uptown, which was a B-side for him as a bonus track on it. Assault Attack, Michael Schenker Group, my number 3 from 1982.
Interesting. I remember having an album of theirs on cassette from 1987. and I used to listen to it a little bit. I don't remember the name of it, but they were called MSG, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
They weren't called Michael Schenker. Is that the same band, MSG and Michael Schenker
Yep.
Group? Okay. I don't know what happened to that cassette.
There you got your Michael Schenker Group and your MSG symbol there.
Yeah, this was like
later they became the Macaulay Schenker Group when Robert Macaulay sang for Michael Schenker, and they were still MSG.
Well, when I had that MSG cassette, it was right before I started to listen to stuff like 120 Minutes and things like that. And when I started listening to 120 Minutes and, I think heard a few other records, my whole world got flipped upside down. But I remember having that cassette in '87 is what I'm saying. So, I
can see the picture on the back here. But Graham Bonnet, just every picture I've ever seen of him when he sang for Deep Purple or Rainbow and these guys, Alcatraz, even the Graham Bonnet group now, he just always looks a little out of place. Whereas everybody else has the longer hair. He always had that shorter cropped blonde hair.
Yeah, I remember him on the Rainbow. Is it Rainbow? Since You've Been Gone, was that Rainbow or Deep Purple?
That was Rainbow.
Okay, I remember him in that video. Yeah, he doesn't look like the rest of the band at all.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Alcatraz. I thought Steve Vai was in Alcatraz at one point.
He was.
Okay. I thought you were going to go into Steve Vai thing. Sorry, I didn't mean it. So.
I saw him with Wingnut Malmsteen.
All right. Is it time for my number 2?
Time for your number 2. I think I know what it's going to be.
It's going to be Rush Signals. This is one of my 10 favorite records of all time, okay? I do love Rush. I love some albums more than others, but this is my favorite Rush record. And I know that this is at odds with the heavy rockers, who might like 2112 and, that stuff more, or they might prefer the heavier guitar stylings in an album before in Moving Pictures or even Permanent Waves. But there's something about this record that I connect with so much. Everything thematically in this record, I've always connected with it. I connected with it in 1982, 83 when I first heard it. I don't think I heard it in 82. Maybe I did, but I think I really started to digest it in about 83. Okay. I don't know, I guess at heart, I was an existentialist. I'm not trying to get philosophical here or anything. Okay. But I always saw the world quite differently, and I still do. And this record is for those who see the world differently. In some ways, this record was kind of a precursor to me personally for Radiohead's Kid A. 19 years later, because it tackles similar subjects like alienation, conformity, man versus technology. There's a lot. These are the themes of this record, but the songs are all so good. The musicianship is so good. Geddy's singing in a lower register now, and I like him all the more for that, personally. As great as Moving Pictures was, okay, this is where I go against the norm. As great as Moving Pictures was, and it is also a masterpiece, I never cared for Limelight on that record. And I still don't. Every other song on the record's gold, but Limelight, it sounds like an arena rock song. It's not my thing. This record, Signals, does not have one miss, okay? The first 6 songs on the record are so good. I mean, Subdivisions is one of the greatest radio songs of all time. I connect with this song big time. I still do. It still holds very true to today, okay? The Analog Kid, fantastic song. A little more hard rocking than people think it is, okay? It's not as hard rocking as the stuff, on Moving Pictures and before, but it's more guitar driven than people give it credit for. Chemistry is probably my second favorite song on the record. It's just kind of new wave-ish prog, kind of a hybrid. It almost has a new wave kind of a feel to it, but the time changes are still there, okay? This is very much like an art pop record, really, if it comes down to it. And I love it. Digital Man, one of my favorite Rush songs of all time. Like the first side of this record with Subdivisions, Chemistry, and Digital Man, those are all top 10 Rush for me songs of all time. Digital Man has got kind of the reggae breakdown in it, and I like the way they do it even more than the Police. I know they were inspired by the Police around this time, but the way they do it is even better. And some of the lines in Digital Man about looking for Avalon in a you got a date with a black sedan. It's very much like a man versus technology kind of song. All right. And I relate with this song. The other side, you've got sides 2 starts with a weapon, genius of a song. Okay. Fantastic. It almost sounds like John Carpenter going Prague. All right. Kind of the texture on it. I love it. Interestingly enough, I actually have the MFSL CD of Signals, and the version of the weapon on that MFSL special CD, okay, gold CD, it's got a different version of the weapon, like an extended version, and it's a really interesting listen. I just need to bring that up. Then you got New World Man, another song about fighting with technology. The young man trying to make his way through the wilderness of technology, right? And everything. Again, the song made sense to me back then, and it still does. And it's very much a pop song, an art pop song. There isn't even a guitar solo on New World Man. Okay, it's a great song, a great piece of art pop, and it was the only Rush song to ever go into the top 40, by the way. Okay, that's true.
Cool, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and the in the U.S. And the last 2 songs are probably the weakest tracks on the record, but they're still really good. Losing It, love the music on it, love the violin on it, Jim. I think that's Ben Mink on the violin there. Okay, love the violin. The only problem I have with the song, even though it's still really good, Geddy's vocals on the track, which are fine on the rest of the record, they don't sound quite sad enough for the material lyrically on the song. Okay, it's such a somber lyrical song. Maybe Geddy's vocals could have been a little sadder on this track. I'm nitpicking, okay? It's still a good song. And lastly, Countdown. Great music on the song. It's the only song on the record that I don't care for the lyrics on. Some of the lyrics in the song, and like, being on the Florida coastline, I know it's inspired by the NASA thing, okay? I know this, and I know it's heartfelt, but lyrically, it's just not as strong as the rest of these great lyrical songs in the record. But the music on Countdown is great. I'm nitpicking. All these songs are great. The first 6 are solid gold. This record is an 11 out of 10 and one of my 10 favorite records of all time.
Yeah, definitely in my honorable mention. I'm a big Rush fan as well, and to me, there's no such thing as a bad Rush album. Just some are better than others.
Yeah, it's my favorite. I know I go against the grain on that one, but
there's a little bit of a change for them. Alex almost takes a back seat on that record a lot on Signals. A lot more keyboard driven. They've done some keyboard stuff, but yeah, great album. Good choice. All right, my number 2. Another one that I discovered this guy as a guitar player in late 80s, early 90s when he was doing blues music, and it was real British blues, cream type of a sound. And Gary Moore became one of my favorite guitar players when he was doing his blues stuff. Since discovered some of his older stuff, not only his stuff when he was with Thin Lizzy, but his solo stuff, that a lot more hard rocking. Corridors of Power, great album. It's not the Gary Moore of Still Got the Blues. It's the Gary Moore. He was playing a Strat at this time. Got a free cover on here, Wishing Well, which is Gary does a great version of it. What was the other song? Don't Take Me for a Loser is a great song. Always Gonna Love You is another great song. Front to back, this is a solid 9.5 out of 10 for me. This album, definitely worth a listen. If you haven't checked out Gary Moore, he's one of those guys that I miss every single day since he left us too soon here about 12 years ago or so. And just a lot of great music in his catalog, and one of those albums that I had forgotten about till the last couple of years, and it's definitely in heavy rotation on my house now. Corridors of Power, Gary Moore.
Okay, great pick.
Number one.
Okay, are we at my number one? We're at my one, right? Okay. I don't know. I need to just, I'm going to preface this before I go into it. I'm not going to go into it too long here, okay? But I mean this. When I heard this record the first time, it was August of 2016, okay? That I had heard this record for the first time in its entirety. And a little bit of a side note, I was kind of messing around with some musicians at the time, and I mentioned my liking for the vocalist and her vocal style quite a bit, but I really hadn't heard that much of their stuff before I really started to get into the stuff in 2016. Okay. This was one of those albums that I knew their most famous album, and I knew all their singles, including several on this record. But I couldn't even tell you that the singles came off of this record in 2016. When I sat down and listened to, I'm going to pull it out now, Siouxsie and the Banshees, A Kiss in the Dream House in 2016, I have never heard anything like this record. Okay, it is my favorite record of all time, bar none. Why? Because it's the only record I've ever heard, ever, where there's a sweet spot that is hit between fantasy and reality. It is that record. This record plays like an adult fairy tale. Okay? If this band, this vocalist, they have fairy tale elements inherent within them, within the music, within their look, within their presentation, within the themes on the albums. And this album, A Kiss in the Dream House, as strong as its predecessor, Juju, is, which is also a masterpiece and an 11 out of 10, this one, A Kiss in the Dream House, is their ultimate fairy tale statement and the greatest fairy tale statement I've ever heard. It opens up with Cascade.
Juju before that album or after that album?
Juju was the record before this, and kind of like Rush, it's a pretty big departure from the previous record.
Yeah.
You go from Moving Pictures to Signals, it's it's a pretty big change. Well, in a very similar vein, well, it's very different. I mean, you can't really compare Siouxsie and the Banshees and Rush. They're very different. They're both great artists. That's the one thing they have in common. But they both scaled the guitar back on their next records. The guitar, compared to Juju, the guitar is still very prominent here, but John McGeoch is used in a different way than he was on Juju. There is nothing as heavy sounding on this record as Monitor or Voodoo Dolly or Night Shift, and even the singles aren't as guitar driven as Spellbound and Arabian Nights. The guitar is scaled back here. However, it is more psychedelic than its predecessor. It is more avant-garde than its predecessor. It is more experimental than its predecessor, and it's certainly more salacious than its predecessor. This is the most salacious album I've ever heard. Okay? I said it's an adult fairy tale, and it is absolutely delicious, avant-garde, psychedelic, mysterious, all at once, with great layered textural vocals from Siouxsie. It opens up with Cascade, which is kind of one of the rock tracks on the record. Great bass line from Steve Severn in this song. Big sub-aquatic sounding bass. Great guitar piece by McGeoch. Again, it's not quite as heavy sounding as the stuff on Juju, but you really hear how this song probably influenced She Sells Sanctuary by The Cult, this particular track. It's pretty obvious if you listen to Cascade. And this record predates Love by The Cult by a good 3 years, by the way. We go into Green Fingers, great track. Obsession, one of my favorite songs on the record. Proto Trip Hop, all right? If you like Portishead, it sounds like their whole career was kind of originated, or not originated, but based upon this particular track, Obsession. Proto Trip Hop, creepy, kind of a vibe. Great lyrics by Siouxsie on and vocals on the song. She's a Carnival, a little bit more upbeat. Circle, very avant-garde. This is one of the Banshees did several songs. They made several songs backwards. Okay, kind of like the Beatles did on Revolution #9. I remember Radiohead like spinning plates off what record was that off of? Amnesiac was a backward songs, but I didn't realize until I really started listening to Siouxsie and the Banshees that they've played 3 or 4 songs backwards. Okay, Circle was maybe the first one, maybe, but it's brilliant avant-garde song where Siouxsie's going off It's very much a spontaneous kind of a feel. This song, I love it. The other side of the record, Melt. Which was one of the 2 singles from the record. I don't think this was the best choice as a single. It works much better within the frame of the album, but it's a beautiful song, haunting lyrics on the song, graphic imagery, very much like a painting. Steve Severin wrote this one. Great song. Painted Bird, maybe my favorite song on the record. Just a tremendous kind of it has a very modern sound. The guitar work on this song by McGeoch. Great lyrics and vocals by Siouxsie. Cocoon, interesting song, kind of a psychedelic jazz lounge hybrid, which near the end of the record, I love it. Love the vocals on the song. Again, has a very spontaneous feel to it. And lastly, the great Lost Banshees single, that would be Slow Dive. I have no idea how the song only got to number 41 on the UK charts. I don't know how it wasn't number 1 in any world with a rightful listening. This song should have been number 1 on the pop charts. It's brilliant. Avant pop art dance with violin, dance beats, psychedelic, all thrown into one. Fantastic song. What I love so much about this album, though, is the way that it's not a concept album, but all the songs string together so cohesively. It is so cohesive. The songs string right into another like a fresh catch from the sea. It's perfect. It's my favorite song of all time. I love the experimentation. I love Siouxsie's vocals. I love the psychedelic nature. It's the best. My number 1.
Good choice. I definitely need to spend a little bit more time with that album. I really liked Juju when you had me listen to that a few months back, and grew a lot of respect for Steve Severin's playing. So definitely want to check that one out a little bit more. I did listen to it once and just kind of wasn't my thing. I can't quite put my finger on it. I did like the Kate Bush album better, which was
but you did listen to Boomerang, and it took you several listens to appreciate Boomerang, remember?
Yep, true.
So you might need to listen to Dreamhouse a few more times. The difference in Dreaming and Dreamhouse, Dreaming is more, it definitely qualifies as a progressive rock record with all the time changes. A Kiss in the Dreamhouse is nothing progressive about it at all, but it's probably more avant-garde than the Dreaming.
Yeah,
they're equals in terms of experimentation, but I just as great of a vocalist as Kate Bush is, and she is, Siouxsie's layered, textured vocals are just unbeatable for me. So there you go.
All right, my number 1. This was an easy one for me. I knew kind of going in what this was going to be. A band that over the last 20 years, I used to get made fun of for listening to these guys because they're a little more poppy than a lot of the stuff I listen to. But I've grown to just appreciate the pure musicianship in this band. And I would argue that of any rock band there is, that it is the greatest assembly of musicians that there is. These guys have played on literally thousands and thousands of records, including the number 1 selling album of 1982. They were the backing band on Michael Jackson's Thriller album, which is incidentally in my honorable mentions. But even wrote the song Human Nature on that album, and played on everything from Michael Jackson to Streisand, everybody in between. But my favorite album, and I've got a copy of it somewhere, but for the life of me I couldn't find it, is Toto 4. I can't say enough about Steve Lukather as a guitar player And Steve Lukather, who was on this list, Robin Ford, who appears on the Kiss album, Gary Moore, three of probably my five favorite guitarists included on this list from 1982. And Lukather, I don't think gets enough credit for his vocals. He's got the ballads. He sings a lot of the ballads. He shares the vocals on Rosanna. He sings the vocals on I Won't Hold You Back on this album, which is just a great ballad. Quite frankly, I never have to hear Africa again. I'm not a big fan of that song, but just front to back, this is a great album. Anything that Steve Lukather and Jeff Porcaro, who I believe to be the greatest rock drummer ever, even better than Neil Peart, John Bonham, and a lot of those guys, Jeff Porcaro can play a shuffle like nobody else. There was even termed the Porcaro shuffle, and if you listen to Rosanna, you can hear it prominently in there. And if you listen to it carefully, you wonder where the guy's two extra hands are, where they're coming from. That's how good it is. David Paich, just an incredible keyboard player, and does a lot of the horn arrangements, the orchestra arrangements on the album. Steve Porcaro, Jeff's brother, on keyboards. David Hungate on bass guitar. I just can't say enough about the band Toto and what they've meant to me personally. And like I said, I'll go ahead and hit my honorable mentions. Of course, this album has to be mentioned. Michael Jackson, Thriller, and the honorable mentions. What else do I got here? All right. I was going through today and came across this album, one I forgot about from 1980.
Oh, yeah. That's a great one. I like that one.
Auto Nova album.
I really love, is it Fantasy?
Fantasy, yeah.
Great song.
The great video, too, where he...
Oh, I love it. It's so classic when he's breaking down the vault with the guitar. The other guy can't break it down. He's got to bring in his guitar and a laser beam,
My favorite Pete Townsend solo album, All the Best Cowboys Have Chinese Eyes. Underrated REO Speedwagon album. Diver Down, not my favorite Van Halen, but...
That was my first Van Halen record.
One I know you listened to, Love Over Gold, the Dire Straits.
I thought that was really very good. Outstanding.
Asia.
Okay.
I had some CDs here. Iron Maiden, Number of the Beast.
Classic record.
For Vengeance.
Classic record.
Accept album, Restless and Wild.
Okay.
But I think maybe the most underrated album of 1982, maybe of the 80s. The Debut by Vandenberg.
Okay.
Big Adrian Vandenberg fan. It's right at the onset of sort of hair metal, and just a great album, worth checking out. So that's my top five and honorable mentions. Jeff, did you have any honorable mentions?
Yeah, I'm going to pull them out right now. And I'm going to kind of go in order as which one might have got the closest. One of them's going to be, and this is interesting because you just saw Todd Rundgren in concert, okay?
Yeah.
So you should appreciate this one. It's going to be the Psychedelic Furs, Forever Now.
Okay.
And this is actually the American cover. It's got a big hit, pretty big hit, Love My Way, which was made famous in the movie Valley Girl. Great scene in the movie with the song. I love that song. This is a very good record. Probably my favorite Psychedelic Furs record, produced by Todd Rundgren. Also, and I want to mention in our episode last week, I incorrectly stated the name of this album. It's actually The Blue Mask by Lou Reed. That is the same still that was used on Transformer. It was used 10 years later, and they made it blue, and they called it The Blue Mask. Title track is absolutely intense on this record. My House is great. I love the song, The Heroine. All these songs are really good. This comes back to the Velvet Underground stuff more than the other Lou Reed records. It's got a kind of a, I don't know, a more avant-garde feel to it that I love. Okay, honorable mention. Roxy Music, Avalon. Okay, this actually looks like a Wishbone Ash album cover, Jim. Doesn't it?
It does.
It doesn't look, the if there was ever an album cover by a band that was not really something you would associate with the band, look at all these other Roxy album covers with the models on them all over the place, and then you get this one that looks like I think it's got like an Avalon theme to it, but it reminds me of a Wishbone Ash album cover. This record's incredible. I mean, it's probably my fourth favorite Roxy Music record, but you cannot deny the sculptured beauty of this record. The title track, Avalon, is great. I love the space between. But my song of the year, my song of the year is going to be More Than This off this record. Okay, made famous and lost in translation. I loved it long before then. Peter Gabriel, Security. Shock the Monkey, San Jacinto, The Rhythm of the Heat. I Have the Touch, great album, masterpiece, probably his second best solo record. And lastly, The Cure, Pornography, didn't get in the top 5. Sorry, Cure fans. It's a great record, though. The Banshees are better, but this is kind of their juju, okay? But not as strong, but very good. Some great tracks on here. A Strange Day, one of my favorite Cure tracks. Cold, and probably the song that I connect with the most on this record, Siamese Twins. Pretty harrowing track, but I do like Pornography by The Cure quite a lot as well. And those are my 5 honorable mentions.
Great choices. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll be back in a couple weeks. We're going to focus on Rush over the next couple weeks. And 2 weeks from tonight, we'll be back with our top, ranking the 70s albums from Rush. One of our favorite bands for both of us.
Going back to our roots.
Be nice to explore that catalog again. And we'll just go with the studio albums. We won't include the live album from the 70s in there. But we'll just go with the studio albums from that. So no Exit. Was that Exit Stage left? Or All the World's a Stage?
I think that was All the World in All the World's a Stage was in 76, and that it took stuff from 2112 and before.
Yep. Okay. So we won't include that one. We'll just go with the studio albums. I think that's 6 albums, 7 albums.
Well, you got the debut up to Hemispheres. It's either 5 or 6, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's 6, maybe 7. I don't know.
I want to say 7 for some reason. We'll look into it. We'll
we
rank
can't
those.
Count very well anymore.
We'll rank those in a couple weeks. But thanks for tuning in. Make sure you comment, like, and subscribe to our channel. Comment. Let us know what your 5 favorites are from 1982. Until next time, keep rocking, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thanks for watching, folks. Have a great night.